Hello everyone, this is Mrinal, and in this video we are going to look into parameters and arguments that are present in a Python function. So by the end of this video you will be aware of what are arguments, what are parameters, and what are the different types of arguments that are being passed in a function. And also yet another point that as you can see there are different types of arguments. What are the rules through which we can combine these different kinds of arguments together, right? In our blog post, it's written the different contents that we are going to look into. So let's first differentiate between an argument and parameter. So let's go to our Jupyter notebook. So I'll write a very simple function. Okay, here we have a simple function definition which does nothing but to add two numbers. So now these a and b that are present in the function definition. So this is a function definition and this is a function call. We are aware of that. This a and b are called as parameters, right? Because they are the one who are actually going to take the value and perform some sort of an operation with that value, right? So these variables are actually the parameters that are present in the function definition, and the value that we actually pass during a function call is called as an argument. As simple as that. So if we just simply run it, so it will give us the value of 30. So again, arguments and parameters. So arguments are nothing but that are passed in a function call, and parameters are those declared in a function definition, right? So if you go to the blog post, you can find the theoretical definition of it as well as some examples, right? So here a, b, c are parameters and 10, 20, 30 are the arguments, right? So now let's move into the types of arguments, right? So what kind of arguments are actually passed in a function? So basically Python allows us four kind of arguments to be passed. The first one is required or positional. The second one is default argument. Then we have something called as a keyword argument, and then the very famous the star args and kw and star kw args, right? So we'll talk about each of them individually. Now first move over to positional or required arguments. Now these are the arguments which, if present in the function definition, has to be passed. As simple as that. Now what does it mean? Now in this function, this a and b are positional arguments. That means if I have to call this add function, I have to provide two integers, right? No more, no less. So what I mean by that, so if I write something of this sort, add, and just pass maybe 10 in it. So as you can see, it is throwing an error that add function is missing one positional argument, right? So again, if I try something opposite of it like 30 and then I pass another variable, so yet again it will throw me an error that okay, it takes two positional arguments but three were given. So that is the basic idea behind positional arguments. So these are kind of required arguments, which means that as many numbers as there are parameters in the function definition, that exact number of arguments has to be present in the function call. As simple as that, right? So that is what's written. So this is nothing but the required function that needs to be supplied during the function call, right? So certain examples are also given, similar kind of a thing. So please go through it and I guess it will make sense to you. So the next thing is the default argument. Now interesting thing is that at certain scenario we might find that okay, we can just provide it with a default value, and if the user wants to overwrite it, he or she can do it, else we'll just work with the default value. So what do I mean by that? So imagine I want to add 10, something of that sort. So I'll just add another number and just assign it to be 10, and then we'll just simply add c. Right, so in this scenario, if I pass three variables, three arguments, so third one is 30, so it is going to, so obviously I have not executed it, so I got to do that, yeah, and I'll just remove it, yeah. So as you can see, we have two positional argument, and this one c equal to 10 is a default argument. So it is a kind of a variation of a positional argument where you assign a default value to one of the positional argument, right? So what does it say? So if I want to override the value, that is c is by default 10, if I want to override it with 30, it is doable, it will add it. And the interesting part is that if I don't supply it, right? Still it is going to execute without throwing an error. That means 10 plus 20 plus 10 will give us 14 here. Does it make sense? So that is the idea behind a default argument. Now, one of the important thing that we have to remember during a definition of a function using a default argument is that the default argument must be preceded by non-default argument. Now, what do I mean by that? So if I try and do something of this sort, if I want to assign b a default value, maybe 10, let's see what happens. So it throws an error that, okay, non-default argument follows a default argument. That means this one, C, it is a non-default argument. It's just a simple positional argument, and it is being followed by a default argument. And this is not allowed, right? And obviously, if you think about it, it doesn't even make sense. So if you just provide two values, so which one is it? So in that scenario, what we have to do is always, if you have to assign some sort of a default value to any of the parameters, then that particular parameter has to be at the end, right? It should be preceded by non-default argument. That is, non-default arguments should come in front of a default argument. So if I just assign it 5, and it will work fine, right? So that is one of the caveats of default argument that we have to take care of, right? So here it is written that default argument cannot be followed by non-default argument in a function definition. Now the next thing is a keyword argument, and now yet again it's interestingly simple. So what we do, I'll just simply remove it, make it a normal positional argument type. Now what we can do, obviously we can pass 10, 20, 30, and what it symbolizes is that, okay, A is equal to 10, B is being given a value of 20, and C is being given 30. That is one of the way. Another way is that we can assign the values by mentioning the name of the parameters itself. So suppose I don't want A to have the value 10, I want B to be having the value 10. So I can just simply write that B is equal to 10 and C is equal to 20, and let A is equal to 10. Now obviously in this particular example it is not going to make any difference, but you will find certain scenarios where you actually have to assign values individually to each and every parameter. So if I just execute it, now obviously you can see that there is no change in it. The answer is same. Now we have been using keyword arguments. So these are actually the keywords. So we have been using keyword arguments. So do you remember in the print function? So if I write something of that sort, so maybe hello, and then if I pass there, right, and if I just simply execute it, that is what it's working. But we can change this behavior, right? So there are more arguments in the print function, if you remember. So we can have SEP, which stands for separator, and we can just pass something of this sort, like two hashes in between. And if I just execute it, the two hashes has been inserted in between, right? And you can see this behavior here. We have used an example of a keyword argument where the keyword is SEP separator, and we have provided it with value. Does it make sense? So that is how a keyword argument works. And in most of the functions that are in Python, maybe in the standard library, or even inbuilt functions, actually has a good deal of keywords in it. So I'll just try and find help on our print function, and you can actually see that how many keyword arguments it has. So you can see that, okay, value is just a kind of a positional argument, or even, and here we have one of the keyword argument is set, which is by default a space. Then we have end, which is basically provided as a new line by default. So it's both an example of a keyword as well as a default argument. So we can change it. If I want to change the end argument, we can do that. End is equal to, maybe I'll put an ampersand in it, and if I execute it, so you can see an ampersand gets added to the end of my string. Does it make sense? So this was an example of a keyword argument, right? So in our blog post also, you can go through the ideas. So next we will jump into args and KW args. right? And one thing that is pretty important is that in Python domain, we use these terms args and kw args, right? But this is not mandatory. What is important is these stars, one single star and two star. One star means a variable length argument or multiple arguments, and star star means basically again multiple arguments but keyword arguments. That's the basic idea behind it. So we have taken an example in here. So as you can see, this is a very naive code where we are trying to add 10 numbers, more or less, and we have actually done it. But this function is not capable of adding the 11th number in it, right? So yet again, it can add 10 numbers, but if I want to add yet another number that is a total of 11 numbers, this function is not capable. So as we have seen, so as many positional arguments are there, only those number of arguments can actually be passed in the function call. We cannot pass less, we cannot pass more, right? But at a certain scenario, we will have situations where we need to pass variable number of arguments in it. So in that scenario, star args and star star kw args actually come into play, right? So let us just see an example in here. So let us define a function, again add, but this time we are going to put star args in it, right? And for I in args, right, we'll try and return the sum. This plus equals I. So obviously we need to assign some default value to sum, so we can just do that. And finally, I'll just print it. Print sum. Right, now if I want to call it, so AD, if I do something of that sort, 10, 20, it gives me an answer of 30, fine. And now if I want to add more numbers in it, still we are capable of doing that. So that is the power of a variable length argument depicted by star args, right? Now the interesting thing that we have to remember is that this args or whatever, if I just rename it with something else like var or something, and we replace it by var obviously, so it will work just the same. There is no distinction. The only thing that matters, as I mentioned earlier, is star. Now if I just try and print the type of the var, so we can see the type of var is a tuple. That means any kind of operation, now tuple is a data structure, inbuilt data structure in Python obviously. So any operation that is being allowed on a tuple can also be performed with star vars or star args, right? As simple as that. So that is the idea behind it. Now another important thing that we can do is using something called as a keyword arguments. So let us go to kwargs. So what is its purpose? It is used to provide multiple keyword arguments. In case of star args, it was just multiple arguments, but in this case, it is multiple keyword arguments. So some of the examples have been given in here also. So we'll just jump into it. So it's very simple code. We have defined a student info. And then we have star args in it, and then we have actually iterated with args.item. So let us just write into it and let's see how it turns out. So maybe def stu inf, something of that sort, and we can write like star. Again, let us put var, because again kwarg is not important. That is just a variable name, so any valid identifier will work. For key comma val in var dot items, and then we can just simply print key print val, and this function is done. So we'll just jump out of it, and now let us call this function with certain values. So suppose I want to display the name of one single student, so only his name I'm aware of as of now. So I can write name is equal to John, something of that sort. And if I execute it, so obviously this part is basically my key and this part is my value. So that's why first key gets printed and then value gets printed, right? So the interesting thing is that again, as it is a variable linked argument, I can provide as many arguments as I want. So stu inf, and I can provide name is equal to dev or something, and then I can provide an age argument which is maybe 29, and I can even provide address argument which is maybe something like that sort. And if we execute it, obviously we are going to get each and every item from var, this particular variable. Now the interesting thing, as we have seen in case of star args, now var also have a type. Now we can see the type of this particular star var is dict. That means it's a dictionary. So any operation that can be performed on a dictionary, a similar operation is also doable on star kwargs, right? As simple as that. So again, let me reiterate. So star args is basically tuple and star kwargs is a dictionary. Now another important thing that we have to remember while combining different arguments together, that is, in a function you are defining both a positional argument or default argument and even a combination of star args and kw star args. So in that scenario, certain rules has to be remembered. The first rule we already encountered, that non-default arguments have to precede, that means come before default arguments, right? So we have already seen it. This was the example where if I have to provide some sort of a default argument, then default argument should be preceded by non-default argument, right? So if I do that, it will work. As simple as that. The second thing is that positional argument has to be preceded by star args and star kw args. That is, whatever the positional argument has to come before. As simple as that. Another thing, in between star args and star kw args, star args should be preceded by star kw args. So similar kind of a logic where non-default argument should come before default arguments, right? I hope it made sense. So go to a blog post, it will make more sense. And if you like that video, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content. And I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.